Rogers, CNN national security commentator and former Republican House Intelligence Chairman. So my first question is, you look at all this information Belgian prosecutors are releasing about what he has confessed to them.
Right.
How could that information impact other people in their network still flowing around Europe? Because the same happened with Salah Abdeslam. They released info from his confession, and then a few days later we saw the attack.
Yeah, and there's some speculation, and I think it's good speculation, from the first release of the confession. Some said, was that a signal to go ahead with the event? What I think it was is it ramped up the pressure on them to do something. I think the terrorists who actually conducted the attacks believed at one point they might be getting on to us. We're not sure. Let's just ramp up one of the other operations we had pre-planned. So some of these had pre-planning, had never been executed. I think the airport attack was exactly one of those. So that's what you see. I'm a little surprised that the Brussels, as a former FBI agent, the Brussels prosecutors are already talking about information that he provided. You would hope that that would get into the hands of investigators first and allow the investigators to do their work before this public notion that he's cooperating and giving other details.
Yeah, the U.S. it's done pretty differently.
Yeah, we would do it much differently.
What stuck out to me, though, was that these targets they had picked out initially were not in Belgium, they were in France. So they thought, after the Paris attacks, that they could go back to France from Belgium. Where's the border security in all of this?
Yeah, well, what it tells you is that the EU has this big problem, and they're starting to get this notion. But you can travel very easily, and it was designed, really, when the EU came into place, they would talk openly about trying to have U.S. type of a system.
But in order to have that, you have to protect the EU's own border.
Well, exactly. That's the part that they missed. And so they had, especially on the migrant problem and the process for security, the huge numbers of bad paper. Just recently, they came up with 4,000 of these residency stamps to Greece, meaning they looked identical. You could not determine them. Even professionals were having a hard time, meaning they had these stamps that were for sale. You get the right passport, you put a stamp in it, and now guess what? You can go from Greece to Turkey to France. And so they had this huge stolen paper, this good paper that causes bad guys to do bad things, and you had this new standard of being able to travel across Europe with very, very minimal checking along the way, and it just was a recipe for disaster for them.
Right, and I was interviewing someone last week at the Terrorist Screening Center who said they don't routinely use the data that the U.S. shares with them about potential terrorists.
Yeah, they have been stuck in this hangover on privacy, and they based it on, in the old days, and this is a World War II hangover for them, that their intelligence services were to protect the state against the citizens, right? And they never made that flip, that their intelligence and law enforcement services are now to protect the citizens against external threats. And so all of their rules, their regulation, and their policy is the intelligence service and law enforcement are bad by assumption, and let's make it hard for them to do what they need to do. And that's what they have to get over.
But, you know, you look at the way it's set up now, pre-9/11 in the United States, we had a similar issue.
Yeah, sure did.
And 9/11, of course, was our wake-up call. This is a wake-up call for Europe, so we'll see what changes. Yeah, we hope. But let me just ask you this. Could you, Abrini, he was involved with the Paris attacks based on evidence collected, and then he goes on right under the Belgians' nose and is part of another attack in Brussels. How big of an intelligence failure is that? And
well,
what
again,
does that represent to you in terms of the problem over there?
It's about sharing. So the Turks said that they provided information on all of the, well, at least the majority.
They said they provided a name, though.
Well, but the name was able to be traced back to the cell had you had an aggressive law enforcement agency tracking down that lead. So you give a name like that to the FBI or the New York police.
We have one database for them.
You bet. They're going to go down, they're going to work it, and they're also going to put they're going to put, you know, leather on the street, as they would say, to run down this lead. They take it that serious. They didn't do that. And it tells you that there's this cultural problem, right? They don't know how to integrate information coming from outside agencies and take that information and turn it into an internal law enforcement lead. That's a huge problem. In Brussels, they have something like 6 different districts, lots of infighting. All of that spells disaster for them.
But this goes back to my original point that the U.S. now has this comprehensive terror database that we developed after 9/11. We share that information with the Europeans.
Right.
So so, you know, theoretically, if they had checked his name against the comprehensive database here, right, that could have flagged him.
Could have flagged him.
Could, and that's a big, and it's not a silver bullet,
it's always a big if,
sure.
because they're very good at changing identities and,
exactly.
and surreptitiously staying in places where they might not be associated to be. All of the things that they're trying to do to cover their tracks, they're doing those things. But a good law enforcement agency will take all that external data and then collate it with what they have and then try to isolate the investigation. That's how they would do it. We would do it certainly here, and that's where they need to be doing it there. The problem is that's not the way they're constructed. Again, they have weakened law enforcement intelligence services capabilities and to do these investigations because they always believed after World War II, remember, you know, the Stasi was bad. They came after citizens, not bad guys. And so the rules and the regulation errs on the side of what they would call privacy and keeping them back. The threat is different, and the agencies today are very, very different, and they need to make that cultural shift.
So the cultural shift, policy changes,
yes,
you know, that kind of thing. Mike Rogers, thanks so much for breaking it down for us. We do appreciate it.